Thank you. Before I start, I want to engage you a bit, since we have a competition of the best picture, and we'll take a picture that only I can take, and that's a selfie from the stage. So I would like all of you to wave your hands now to get your blood flowing, since we haven't had a break, and then I'll take a fantastic selfie from stage. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Wave your hands. I'll take another one. Wave your hands. So, let me just tweet that. Good. So let's go to my talk on engagement. So first I want to say a couple of words about myself. I think a good way to nowadays find out who people are is, text Google is boring. Do an image Google for people to know who they are. So as you can see, what I have, my image Google is rather colorful, and there's lots of heat maps and colorful cupcakes, and that's because I've been working with eye tracking for quite a number of years. So my background is I'm working at a company called Tobii Technology as a trainer and knowledge manager. So I'm basically been helping a lot of companies and universities introduce eye tracking, but also generally research and usability testing and market research. So I'm here today to talk about actually not so much about eye tracking, but about engagement in general. Tobii, as a company, you will be able to meet me and my colleague during the break. We are the world's leading eye tracking manufacturer, and we make eye trackers for research. We make eye trackers for the disabled, people who are completely paralyzed and cannot interact with other humans or with devices. They can use their eyes for interacting with a device, and thus they can live their daily life and use internet like just as you and I. And then we use eye trackers, or make eye trackers also for interaction, for example, to be able to interact with computers or with gaming. So that's kind of Tobii in a nutshell. We're based in Stockholm, and during the break you will have the chance also to come around and test some of our equipment. So, user engagement. First I want to define user engagement, because that's the topic of the World Usability Day this year. So what is engagement, and particularly user engagement? Well, I think to engage someone, just like if I will be able to engage you guys in my talk, I need to maintain and encourage your attention. If you are on that website tweeting too much, that means that probably my speech is too boring, you will not attend to me, thus you're not engaged. So engagement means that I need to somehow maintain and encourage your attention. There should also be a hint of emotion involved. If something doesn't arise some kind of emotion in you, it probably will not be as engaging. It needs to get some interest, it needs to make you think, it needs to maybe attract you to actually do something later on. It also needs to feel pleasurable, something that it pleases you, and generally it should involve you. You want to actually make some kind of action. This is quite a lot to ask from a user, to get them to do all of this, isn't it? So engagement really is like love. You can't force it upon someone. It's like a currency, you need to earn it. If I charge too much, if I ask people to be super engaged when they don't want to, well, they won't do it. So I want to start by talking briefly about different levels of engagement and when can we engage people. So imagine this. I want to go on a romantic holiday. I start looking for my destinations. Well, here I'm really engaged because I think, oh, where could we go? I'm reading on the internet, where could we go for a romantic holiday? I pick up Seychelles. I go to Wikipedia, I read everything about it, read about the climate. I found some website about Seychelles, trying to figure out how is it there, how can I get there, what can I do there. I Google some images and say, oh my God, fantastic beaches, that's really engaging. I read about the hotels, but of course I need to stay somewhere. I read the reviews, a lot of reviews to find out which is the best hotel, and I choose between this and that. I'm super engaged in this day. This can take days or even weeks. I found a hotel, Ladik Island Lodge, and then the less engaging part starts. Now I decided, oh, I want to go to Ladik in Seychelles. Now I just need to find a flight and book a hotel. So I start looking for my flight, and here I don't really want to be engaged. This is where I want to be efficient. I don't want to spend my whole day, oh my God, there's too many choices. Do I take this place or that place? Which one is cheaper? Here I don't really want to be engaged. Same when I have to fill in my booking details, I don't want to be engaged. I just want to get it over and done with, because the engaging part was when I searched for where I wanted to go. The same when I book my hotel, I don't want to be that much engaged over here. So, engagement is like an ice cream. Some parts, when we're working on the web, some things are really delicious and we want to engage with them. We want to lick the ice cream and eat the cherry. But some things are boring, like the crust on the cone. So when you are designing something on your website, think what you have. Are you having content that is delicious, that people want to lick and interact with? Or do you have the boring stuff that people just want to get rid of? So in this specific case, when I find and evaluate a holiday destination, that's something where I'm willing to engage, and also the people who produce the content on the web can have engaging factors. People are willing to watch videos and engage. When I find my hotel, the same thing, I'm willing to engage. It's maybe a bit less engaging than finding my holiday destination. But when we come to hotel bookings, that's more like rather boring. I don't generally want to engage so much. And flight booking, that's just simply boring. There's not much engagement you can have really when booking a flight. So engagement is something you need to think of. Is my content really something that people want to engage with? Is it a cherry, or is it just a dry cone? So when is engagement good? When does engagement matter? Well, particularly in all advertising, if you actually want to sell some kind of message, people need to be engaged, because otherwise they're not going to remember what you're trying to sell. So what you see here is an eye tracking heat map, which I will be show plenty of during my talk. So the red area means that people focus longer or more in those areas, while areas that don't have color are generally not looked at or seen by the participants in a study. So for example, in this case, we can see that people who engage more with the brand, they also remember the brand, which is actually in the bottom right-hand side corner. They remember more of the brand. So if you manage to get people to engage for a few more seconds and look at the brand for some seconds, then it's also more likely that they will remember your message. But forced engagement is also not always good. An example from China, on the two YouTubes of China, Youku and Todo, on this website, they have forced advertising, just like on YouTube. You get an ad, and then you have to watch the ad, and then when the ad is over, you can watch your video. While on Todo, they have the advertisements on each side of the video. And one of our customers in Beijing, they did a study combining EEG and eye tracking to find out what are the reactions, how do people react to advertising, and they found that voluntary attention gave more positive responses. So when people could choose to watch the advertising, they were much more positive towards the brand. But if you force feed them, so they have to watch it, then they're thinking negative thoughts, and they're less positive to the brands that they were looking at. So when is low engagement good? So as I mentioned earlier, for example, when booking a flight, we generally just want to be efficient, because it's not the most pleasurable part of going on a holiday. So one example is from KLM, where one of our customers, Valsplatt, did a usability study on the KLM booking website just a few years ago when they made a rebooking. So on the top, you see, sorry, the picture is a bit blurry, but on the top you see the old design of the KLM booking website. Basically what the design was that you had, as you can see here, you first had the timetable, and then on the right-hand side, you had the price. So it was opposite to here. You had timetable and then price to the right. That meant that people who were booking flights, they had to have eye movements like you see on the top. So the dots shows where people were focusing, and the lines in between, how they were moving their eyes. So this meant that people, of course, wanted to look at the timetable and the price. Those were the two most relevant parts of booking a flight. So as you can see, people look side to side. It's only 3 centimeters, but still a lot of going sideways. So they noticed this in the eye tracking study, and they redesigned the website so it looks like this. The price is close to the timetable. So instead of having to move your eyes this much, you moved your eyes just 1 centimeter to get the essential information. And this led to a 30% increase in conversion on the booking website by just asking people to move their eyes 3 centimeters less. So another example is, so this is an example of when we don't want to engage too much, and by making it easier, it's more likely that people will interact with your product. So, another thing I want to talk about is that we don't engage with everything. So all of you have probably seen this who've been Googling about heat maps. We have the typical golden triangle, which means that studies have shown that people don't read everything on a web page. It's only what's above the fold is what people engage with the most. So for example, Nielsen found out that people spend about 80% of the time above the fold and about 20% of the time below the fold. So people focus more, engage more with content which is presented above the fold on the web page. Another thing that we don't necessarily engage with is content that is too designed, or for example, banners. So this is an example of a person on the Swedish website Tele2, it's a mobile phone provider. They were asked to find and buy mobile broadband. So that's basically this part here. The person was, okay, go to the website, enroll for mobile broadband. And what do we see? Well, we see that the thing that the company was supposed to, their way of trying to get people engaged is to put this as an advertisement, as a banner. We have a big, big picture in the middle of the page. This is our product, but where does the person look? Well, the person looks in all the places where we have navigation. Because for the person, he doesn't think advertising, he thinks navigation. How can I find my way around? So in this case, doing a banner, which the sender, Tele2, thought would be engaging, was not that engaging for the user because they had a completely different mindset. So to this, I would just want to say that also think of what is it that you actually, what are you producing, and will it actually be engaging to that user? Also, all of us are a bit different. We don't all engage with the same things. And I want to show a few more examples of that. So this is from the dating website Match.com. There was an eye tracking study comparison between AnswerLab. And as you can see, there is a gender difference. Both of them are looking for dates from the opposite sex. What are women focusing on? Well, they're focusing on the stats. They're really reading all the details and stats, not much on the picture. And what are men focusing on? Well, the men are mainly focusing on the picture, spent 65% more time looking at pictures than women. So if I design a website, in this case, it has to be attractive both for men and women, because if it's not, then it's not very compatible. So that means that you actually have to keep this in mind. Who are you designing for? If men are different, if women are interested in the stats, men are interested in the photos, then please give both so you can attract both target groups. Another example is older and younger. Young people versus older people are not behaving the same way online. So this study from 2011, it was shown, for example, that younger people versus older people, I mean, here older was like, I think 55, 60 and above, younger people are even more extreme when it comes to not scrolling down on web pages. So they spend even more time on the above the fold page, while older people were more willing to scroll down on the page. It's like when my dad is using the internet, if there is a banner that pops out, there's something wrong with the computer, he clicks on it, and he gets a virus. But of course, I never do that, because we engage with different things. So with the same study also looked at other things. So a fixation, which I will talk about soon when I talk about eye tracking, is where our eye comes to a stop and when we have visual intake. So they also found that Generation Y, so the younger people, had fewer fixations than the older people. So the older people actually engaged more with the websites. They spent more time looking around compared to the younger people. And then there was also some differences in the type of content they were interacting with on the website. One major thing that I think we do a lot of times is that we present people with too many choices. And many times, less is more engaging than more. And some examples. I worked together with Spotify when they were a small startup company, and this shows a person coming to the kind of the first Spotify website. Let me go back so we can play the video again. So you see there's 4 choices, 4 calls to actions on this website. You come to the website and you see there is free, there's a day pass, and there's a premium, and there's a get started. What did the company want to do? Well, they wanted just people to sign up and get Spotify. Why certain with 4 different choices when there's only one choice you really want them to make? So after this study, they redesigned the website and just put one button, get Spotify here. And I think that's a lot of the times, keep this in mind. Don't serve them if your primary goal is to ask them to get your product, sign up for your product. Don't give them 4 different buttons if you actually only have one thing in mind. You can, of course, add navigation and a menu to give access to the other things, but keep in mind what is where you want them to engage with. Another Swedish study from our daughter company, iTrack Shop. They did a comparison of advertisements. So you can see we're comparing different advertisements by adding more and more details. So on the left-hand side is the simplest ad with no pictures. On the right-hand side, there is more items in the ad. The same down here with this hamburger ad. On the left, nothing, just the price. On the right, we have hamburgers, hot dogs, and French fries, etc. And what they found out in this study is that when you asked people if they understood the message and if they could identify the sender, so knowing who was the advertiser, they noticed that when it comes to understanding the message, at about 2 items, the understanding went down dramatically. So we could keep 2 items in mind, and then the message went through. The same goes for identifying the sender. You see also there's a dramatic drop at about 2 items. Again, meaning people are not going to interact with these ads for a whole day and look at all the content. If they spend just a few seconds engaging with the ad, if you have too many things, they're going to be less engaged. So in this case, it was the middle options that only had 2 items that worked the best. That's when you had the maximum amount of recall and also the maximum amount of remembering who was the sender. So, keep in mind the ice cream. Who are you designing for? What type of content do you have? Keep in mind that people don't always behave like you want them to behave. We're all built in rebellions, and we can see it in every place around us in the real life. You build a path nice and tidy like the architect wanted it, and where do people go? Well, they take the shortcut over the grass because that's how I want to walk. I don't want to go like someone decided. So it's very difficult to force people to change. You have to change how you make your product. Think about what kind of content do people want to engage with, and think from the user's perspective. So the second part of my talk is to talk about how do we then measure this? How do we find out things about people's engagement? What do we get to know? So I want to talk about a few different methods and how we can measure engagement. And I will skip the some of the boring old methods and go to more interesting new methods. So one traditional method is, of course, to just interview people and ask people, how engaged were you? How interesting was this? What did you find about the usability part? Actually, I will skip this part. So a very common that I think most people today who have a website, they use some Google Analytics or some other analytics software to measure how people interact with their web pages. So for example, on Google Analytics, there is actually a measure that is called engagement. This engagement is basically just time people spent on page. It tells you something, but it doesn't give you the whole story. We don't know if people were just lost. We don't know if I was speaking on the phone while just having the browser open. We don't know that much about what actually engaged people on the web page. But it definitely gives you some kind of indication, because if there is hardly any time spent on the page, it's definitely low engagement. If there's plenty of engagement, lots of time, we don't know actually if it's good or bad. So for that, we need to have some more detailed way to research the topic. So as I said earlier, engagement actually involves a lot of us, the whole body basically. It involves my mind, my emotions, my interest, and thus there's a few different methods who can help out in this case. So one of the simpler methods is called skin conductance measures. So I'll explain a bit what this is. So all of us, we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is something we cannot control. I don't control my sweat level. I can't think here and say, okay, I'm going to sweat my hands. Sweat my hands doesn't really work, because that's controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is triggered by, for example, things like engagement. So when we have a person engaging with something, let's say I watch an interesting movie, an exciting movie, there's something really exciting that I read, then we actually start sweating because we get aroused. So aroused means that we get excited. It can also be stress. It can be frustrations. It can be that I'm super happy, super angry, sad, in love, whatever. All of those means that the sympathetic nervous system will be triggered, and a typical reaction is that our skin starts sweating. When we start to sweat, our skin conducts electricity more easily, and by measuring how much the skin is conducting electricity, we can kind of measure the sweat level, and thus you can monitor, like here you can see the amount of how much the skin has been conducting electricity. So this is a way to measure arousal, and this can be used also in usability studies. However, you can only measure really things that really affect us strongly. So if I look at a picture of a flower, of a rose, and a picture of a tulip, there's not going to be any difference. But if I look at a picture of a murdered person and a flower, there's going to be a difference also in skin conductive level. So this method does not really work unless you really manage to stress, frustrate, or engage a person very, very strongly. But you could, for example, in a usability study, if a person is very stressed or angry, you will definitely pick it up in a skin conductance measure. So that's one method that one can use. Not very good at picking up kind of nuances. Emotions is also one part of engagement, and there you can look at people's facial expressions. That's pretty much the only method we have to somewhat objectively measure people's emotions and find out what kind of emotion is this person having at the moment. So there's a number of softwares out there that films the participant's face while they're interacting with a product, and then you can get information about, for example, what's the level of surpriseness, happiness, disgust, and if they're scared by just looking at their facial muscles. However, it's not going to be a one score. You will usually get a combination. So you will see that this person is 30% disgusted, 20% happy, and 3% neutral. What does that mean? Well, it gives you some kind of indication, but It's not crystal clear, but it's still one of the few methods we have today to find out about people's emotions, unless if we ask them. But in general, people have also difficulties describing exactly how do I feel right now. Coming down to the more kind of detailed methods, EEG. I guess all of you have heard what EEG is, but I just want to say kind of briefly what it is. So EEG is a way for us, if you can, if you're able to pronounce there's a reason why people just talk about EEG, because it's a very complicated word. I won't even say it. So basically with EEG, what we do is that in our brain we have neurons. Neurons conduct electricity. When electricity goes through a neuron, it's a very kind of low current that goes through the neuron, always the same direction. So there's the current goes from minus to plus. And in EEG, you put sensors on the head of the person, where you then measure this conductance, or the voltage or the amount of electricity that has passed through the neurons. However, one neuron gives too little, conducts too little electricity, so you can't pick up that. But when we have millions or thousands of neurons that puts electricity through, the electricity goes through those in the same way, we can actually pick that up in the brain. And then in different parts of the brain, the neurons are positioned in different ways, so we can see which parts of the brain is activated, and then we get a waveform where we can see how did these currents go about in the brain. So with EEG, we can find out things about like how much activity do we have in the brain. So we have majority, like 4 different waves. We have delta waves, theta, alpha, and beta. So when we're sleeping, you can see a delta waveform. So it means that we are relaxing, resting, we're sleeping. So that's not a very engaging type of brainwave. Theta brainwaves is when we are concentrated, like when I'm meditating or driving my car and just lost in my inner space. Alpha is when we start to are focusing on something, like watching a good movie or engaging with a website. So here starts kind of the parts that start to become more engaging. And then in beta waves is really when I'm working hard. So by looking at EEG data, we can get some indication about what's the level of engagement. So the more, if we have alpha and beta waves, then the person is probably more engaged compared to if they are having delta waves, because that means that they fell asleep during the study. So there's some software and hardware out there that can measure this. One is, for example, Epoch.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 7th World Usability Day conference in Estonia. My name is Peeter Marmet. I'm your moderator for the day. And to officially open the event, I'm giving the floor to representatives of the organizers, namely University of Tallinn and Trinidad, David Lammas and Hegla Sarapuu.
Thank you. It works.
It doesn't work for me.
It does work, yes. So let me see if our slides are on. They are. Okay, so we put together, so welcome, yes. we put together a word cloud of places of origin in terms of companies, organizations, departments, whatever, and this is what came up. It's very good to see that there is a very broad range of people coming from a broad range of businesses. And I mentioned people because we also put together word cloud of your functions, and we find managers, developers, designers, students, system analysts, analytics, and so on, and so on, and so on. Of course, this is a bit too noisy, so we decided to clean up the data, and then we came up with this. And yeah, this is nice, right? It's a nice pie chart. They actually have different hues, but it's basically the same color. But the point being that most of you are actually dealing with people. See? The managers, analysts, designers, project managers, these are the first slides. And basically, half of the audience deals with people. Managers, analysts, and designers. And then project managers, developers, students, specialists, whatever. It goes on like that. It's interesting to see that on the manager side, because we were putting things together, we've got middle and top management in the room. On the analysts, we've got business analysts, system analysts, software analysts, and just analysts, self-described by you. On the designers slides, we've got web designers, graphical designers, interaction designers, UX designers, UI designers in the slides, and so on and so on. So this is just an aggregation so that you could see who was coming to attend the talks today. So very, very nice to have you here. And then for the ones that actually want numbers, then this is the breakdown in terms of numbers. So 87 managers should be sitting in the room right now, if they are all here, and so on and so on. Okay, so as for numbers, we are now done. We are very, very happy to have you with us. And I will now declare the event open in the name of the rector of Tallinn University, because he delegated in us this opportunity to welcome you in his behalf. And maybe now Hegla wants to say a few words.
Yeah. From me, not a long talk. Welcome all, and I'm so happy that there's so many of you here, and so bad that some couldn't really fit into the room.
Okay.
The biggest problem I have seen, because I've been to hundreds of companies helping them with integrating research into what they're doing, is that I find too many people who are skipping the first 2 points. A lot of people are just collecting data, doing research, but they don't know why. And that's a fact. Even in academia, a lot of people collect data, they do research, but they don't actually know why they're doing it. So always remember, when you are doing any kind of research project, don't start with how do I collect the data, how do I interpret the data. Start by defining your questions. What is it that I need to know? Do I have some problem I want to fix? Start there, and then decide the best method to answer your question. Don't put eye tracking into everything. Don't just use EEG because you have EEG. Maybe what I need to know is something that I get from an interview. Maybe I don't need to hook people up with an EEG device. Maybe I just need to ask people. So define the questions and the methods that you need to answer your questions and problems. Then you collect data, then you analyze the data, and then you should always, of course, have as the goal to take some kind of action and make an improvement. So that leads me to my final part of my talk, which is stakeholder engagement. Another thing that I think we are forgetting a lot of times, and that's stakeholder engagement. And by stakeholders, I mean people who are involved in making decisions to change something. So there's, for example, a recent book that I recommend you to read if you're interested in this. It's called It's Our Research. And one thing that I picked up from this book was getting, this person is working at the, I think it was Google, and he's been talking with a lot of UX professionals, and one thing that he's saying that getting stakeholders buy-in for research is usually the first challenge they mention, and usually the biggest challenge. Because who are the stakeholders? Well, the stakeholders are business people, managers. Some of you people here are managers. Someone needs to convince you that something is wrong or needs to be changed. It's UX people, the designers, it's researchers, it's tech writers, and it's engineering. It's the engineers who will make the changes. It's QA people, it's tech support. For us to be able to make some kind of improvement and some change, you need to convince all of these people. And myself, I had countless of fights with designers who said, no, it has to be yellow. Why? Because it looks good, but the users don't see yellow. They don't know how to interact with it because it's a matter of taste. While management might say, no, we don't have the resources to fix it. It's going to be all right. They can call tech support. But if too many people get angry, then it's not going to be, it's of course going to be not so good. And the same with engineers. Maybe they think that, oh, it's going to be too complicated to implement this. Let's skip it. So you need to involve all stakeholders for us to actually make some kind of change based on the data we get. And what is engaging for stakeholders? Well, it's evidence. Opinions, that's not engaging, but evidence is. Hard evidence show that this is how an actual user is behaving. This is evidence from the real world that it's not working. Engagement is engaging. If I give people a boring report and say, okay, there is a 20-page report, read it. How engaging is that? Well, engage the stakeholders. And there's a few different ways to engage stakeholders. Involvement is engaging. So involve them in your research, because if everyone is involved in the research, they will be engaged, and it's much more likely that some change will actually occur and that some improvement will happen. And the most engaging of them all is live. Things that are live are always more engaging. People who sit here, I bet you're more engaged than those people who sit in their office watching this on the web, or if you watch this 2 years from now, you're probably not as engaged as the people who are sitting in here. So live is engaging. A live football game is always more engaging than something that happened 3 days ago. So engage people live, because in a live scenario, they know it's real, they get engaged. So one from this book as well, I mean, we know that eye tracking, one of the main uses of eye tracking is to use it in a live scenario, because you can see immediately where a person is looking. And this is a quote from the same book, It's Our Research, where they also say about this, that eye tracking is, or by having people look at the gaze, is engaging. So my recommendation is that if you do research, try to engage people live. You don't need an eye tracker to do it, but it helps. Because when people are sitting in the same room, they know that there's a real user doing something with your product, and they have to feel a little bit ashamed. That's the best way to motivate some kind of change. Because if I feel, oh my God, something is wrong, then everyone is motivated to make a change. Another thing is that it gives a shared view of the issues. You don't need to write a report if everyone who is there to make the changes are sitting in the same room, and during the same day you can decide what are the top 3 things we need to fix in our product, if it's then a web page or a software. And it's simple and fast. In the best case scenario, you don't necessarily even have to write a report, because if you make a decision already during the experiment or during the test, then you don't actually need to spend time on writing some reports. So conclusions. Again, when you do any kind of user research, don't focus on 3, 4, 5, 6. Focus on 1 and 2. Define your problems questions. Is there something we need to improve? Do we have a problem we want to fix? Just don't send out a questionnaire to 1,000 people. And when you know what issues you have, decide how can you best answer those questions and solve your problems. And here comes the research part. Collect and answer your data, analyze the data, etc. Use many methods, because by having more methods, I get a more complete picture. And by choosing methods based on what I actually need to find out, which issues I have and what questions I have, I can probably get a better picture of the user. And try to have some kind of continuous improvement. So if I'm using Google Analytics, look at your data, find out, is there some issues, do I have some questions, then do some tests to get some more understanding, make some changes, and see how does this impact on how people are behaving on your website. So, think and plan. What will you need to do? Don't assume anything, because people don't always behave as you have planned. People are rebels. They don't necessarily do exactly like you thought. Don't overdo it. That's another big no-no. People tend to do too big of a study. Spend a user test with 3 people is better than 0. We always think that we need to do like a big shebang, big study, and then everyone, oh, I don't have the time to do this. But test it with 2 people. 2 people is better than none. 100 people is worse than 5, I would say, because 100 people, that's such a big project that you could spend so much time on administration that you won't get anything done. So don't overdo it. Engage the stakeholders, because if you just do research and there's no change, it doesn't matter. You could have just let the research be, because you need to engage stakeholders to make some kind of change. Get actionable insights. In my opinion, the reason why we do user testing, why we need to improve things, is because we want to improve things. So get actionable insights, things that you can actually improve. So define your questions and problems so you can get something changed and done. And finally, do something. Just sitting and complaining will not improve the world. So if you haven't done anything so far, start to do something, because then you can actually start to make a change and some kind of improvement. Thank you.
So, thank you, and now time for questions. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand, and somebody will bring the microphone to you. One is there. I can actually throw one myself. And before, I think there was a question from audience that will the presentation be up on the website later for looking for references? Yes, I think it will be posted on the World Usability Day website as well. So this is the first answer to some question from here. So, your question.
Thank you for presentation. Very engaging.
Thank you.
I have a question about comparing eye tracking and eyes movement tracking. So a lot of services claim that it's quite similar, and mouse movement tracking is cheaper than eye tracking. So what's your comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, mouse movements, yes. I mean, that gives you something, because we move our mouse when we want to make some kind of choice. However, I think it's very few of you who move your mouse in every place you're looking at. That's just simply not how we're behaving, because usually we are moving our mouse when we have made a choice to click somewhere. So for example, on a website, I park my mouse somewhere, I look around, and then I move my mouse. So mouse movements, definitely it gives you some indication of where the person were hovering around before they make a choice, and it tells you where they clicked. Some people do move their mouse, but there's not such a big correlation between mouse movements and eye movements. There is a paper by Google Research, Anne Aula, a Finnish researcher, who's done a lot of comparisons between mouse movements and eye movements in Google search results. And there is a paper on that actually, I can't remember exactly the figures right now, but the correlation, there is a correlation, but it's not very strong. So I think they're complementary, they're not the same.
So I'll ask actually another question from LiveCube, which is kind of related. How expensive is it to use eye tracking for usability tests, like the Spotify testing. So should we care about the mouse tracking? Maybe it's the eye tracking has become so cheap already, so we could just...
I mean, an eye tracker it's still not a cheap device. You can get eye trackers today that are, they're becoming cheaper, but it's something that, it's like, it is not a cheap device. But usually if you don't have an eye tracker yourself, you buy it from a research organization, and I don't know what it costs in Estonia, but that's something you can ask the organizers of this event how much it costs. But usually many research companies charge pretty much the same for an eye tracking study with an eye tracker included compared to like a standard usability study. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, I understand that Trinidad has some of that equipment. But generally, what is the price range of the things? Do you?
Well, I think you need to invest about 12,000 euros to buy an eye tracking system. So it is still an expense to buy a good eye tracking system. You can also buy things for like 99 euros, but that's the eye trackers that doesn't come with any software, and they might not work with everyone, etc. So, and you can even build an eye tracker yourself if you have a web camera. So there's several open source initiatives, but they're not very, they might not work with all participants. That's the main limit with home-built eye trackers.
Okay. Do we have any questions in the audience? Any hands up? Here is, can we get a microphone there?
So do you have to also have some specialists to analyze the data from eye tracker, or you have a special software?
If you're doing live viewing, all of you understood what you saw today, right? You saw a red dot, and you are all humans, so you could understand where the person was looking. So for live viewing, just looking at this gaze replay, if you're human, you can do it. But for if you're an empathic human, if you're someone who don't interact with the world, it probably is difficult. But for general live viewing, yes, that's fairly simple. You can look at the replay and understand what a person is doing. But for more quantitative studies, if we're going into measuring how people are looking, it's like 230 milliseconds long. Is that a long fixation or a short fixation? There you, of course, need competence and you need to know about what eye tracking is. You need to know about eye movements and how to interpret the data. So I would say simple eye tracking, anyone can do. More complex, particularly quantitative studies, does, of course, require knowledge like any more complex research method.
There is Olga's question. Should we use eye tracker when we test wireframe prototypes?
Yes and no. With wireframes, you can't test the looks with an eye tracker. It makes a big difference if this button is big and red or if it's just hollow. Of course, people will probably look at things that are more striking. But you can test structures. So for example, if I have a wireframe of a web page and I have a menu and a sub-menu, then definitely I can test that with an eye tracker because I can see where do people go to find the menu. If they're supposed to find a login button, even on a wireframe, they will go instinctively to the top right corner, for example, to the bottom left. Where do they go to find information? So for wireframes, for structures, yes, but nothing that involves looks, because if you add color to it, it will become so different. But for navigation, for example, you can definitely use eye tracking for that.
Yes. Okay, there is...
As we know, the world is changing every day. So what do you think, how long we could use the results of the research and when we have to overdo it?
I think it's not true that the world is changing so much. Actually, the technology is evolving. People are not. We're still, we are still behaving the same way. And I think many times we fool ourselves thinking that people have changed just because the design has changed or just because we have, more different devices and different types of websites. People are still pretty much we're behaving the same way today as we did 50 years ago to a large extent. So, and I think that's a challenge for us in an increasing developing world, that we have to remember the humans as well. Just designing things in a completely new way or introducing new products, we have to design them in a way so they fit how people are. And that I think is mainly a design challenge because we can't change the people. It takes a long time to change how people behave. You know, my father has been using the internet for 10 years, and he still clicks on the banners. You know, it's difficult to change people. So keep that in mind. I think it's more important to design for humans than trying to ask all of us to change. And that's, for example, when we are working with eye tracking as a way of interacting. That's a new way of interacting with a computer. And that has been a big challenge for us. We have a whole team looking at how can we make a natural user interface, because we have not been using our eyes to make choices. And that's, we need to introduce it in a way that makes it human, rather than, if I start clicking with my left blinking, that's not very, people will not do that intuitively, so we can't ask them to, look at something and blink. So, yeah. I think you need to start from the person, because we haven't changed that much, and it takes a long time to change people.
And I think we are running into our lunchtime. There is actually one question which has been repeated a couple of times. It's a kind of religious question.
Okay.
How relevant is above the fold today, really? So I know that there is always the two sides beating hardly. Is it important or not? And you're probably the expert to answer this question. It's bothering everybody.
Above or above
the fold, yeah.
I think
is
it
it
depends.
Important?
I think it depends a bit. I think for mobile devices, people are more likely to scroll quickly down and up than they are with like big screen computers. Like, in general, people are lazy. Keep that in mind when you design. People are lazy. They take shortcuts. They don't want to spend a lot of energy on your stuff unless it's really engaging. So I think above, beyond the fold, if I have to scroll 5 pages to find what I'm looking for, I'm probably going to be more frustrated than anything else. I think it has nothing to do with design. It has to do with people. People want to do as little as possible to do their stuff unless it's something really engaging. So when it comes to above, below the fold, in mobiles, people are more used to scrolling because it's kind of easier. On computers, I still think, and it probably will be for a long time still, that people will spend most of their attention on the things that are high above or above the fold, just because we are lazy. And I think that's something we just need to acknowledge.
Okay, so thank you.